All right. All right, everyone, we're live. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Uncovered, your home for all Steelers content here at the Undroppables Network. It's me, your host, Marcus. Beezy's not here today. He's making a lot of money moves in his life right now. He just bought a house. So shout out Beezy. He's not able to make it. However, I am joined by my boy, Johnny Main, who I met at the Fantasy Football Expo, lifelong Steelers fan, and then also Zachary Smith from the 412, founder of Around the 412. So what's up, guys? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man, absolutely, man. Glad to be here. Glad to be with some Steelers fans, chopping it up, man, and talking about my favorite team, man. So appreciate the invite, bro.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me. I know we've been trying to make this happen for a while. We've been reaching out in DMs trying to collab on something. So I'm glad to finally be here. This is my fourth podcast of the day, I think. So I've got the voice ready. I'm prepared for this.
All righty. All right, let's I'll fire up the intro vid for the few people watching, and then we'll just hop right into some content. So here we go. Oh, yeah. Gets me hyped every time. All right.
Yeah, so, I kind of didn't want that to end, to be honest with you.
I know.
Right?
You can tell I picked the clips because there's a lot of there's TJ, my boy, and then there's a lot of the running backs, and I love the running game. So I'm a little bit biased, but nevertheless, Here we go. Okay. Steelers 6-2 heading into the bye week. Just quick 1,000-foot view. Johnny, we'll start with you, then we'll bounce to Zach. Thoughts on the season so far, just real quick, and then we'll get in more specifically to the last two games because I want to talk about Russ. But 6-2 going into the bye week, Johnny, how you feeling?
I feel good, man. I think obviously, could very easily be undefeated at this point, and I think it's kind of hard to be disappointed with what they've been doing offensively. I think their offensive line plays look a lot better than it did last year, and obviously the quarterback position has looked well over the last couple of weeks. Big piece for me, man, is just the way they've looked in the secondary, just being a lifelong Steeler fan and knowing we've had our issues in the past in the secondary, and just seeing that we have two stable corners now, actually three now with Beanie. So, that's been awesome to see, man. And Deshaun Elliott's been great, and letting Minka kind of roam on the back end, man. It's been awesome to see, man. I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah, Zach, what else?
6-2 is about. I thought the floor of where they could be, because if you look at the stretch they have post bye, I thought 5-3 was at minimum where they had to be. But 6-2 is obviously great. And like you said, they're 20 seconds away from also beating the Cowboys. They can't get out to the start they did against Indianapolis, but it all balances out. They probably won a game or two they shouldn't have, and lost a game or two that they shouldn't have, and it's all going to balance out in the end. As far as the quarterback play going to Russ, a move that I certainly questioned. Justin Fields was the guy that I thought they could have started the season with, and it happened, not necessarily for the reason that I thought it was going to. But he did start the season. They go 4-2 in that span, but I think if you're somebody that actually looks beyond the box score, goes and watches the tape, you can certainly see the deficiencies in the offense with Justin, and certainly within the last two games that he played with the passing game, not being able to open things up in that respect. But I will say this: if you look at the numbers over the last 2 weeks, averaging over 31 points per game, if you expand that out to the season, they'd be only behind the Detroit Lions in terms of points per game. So I think you've seen Russ do for that passing game what they were hoping him to do. And you touched on the offensive line there too. If you would have told me we're going to lose Troy Fautanu for the season, we're going to lose James Daniels for the season, we're going to lose Zach Frazier for a couple weeks, and we're going to lose their top interior swingman and Nate Herbig, and this is going to be the play that you're still getting, I've been very impressed in terms of what Pat Meyer's done for everybody not named Broderick Jones.
Right.
And also what Arthur Smith has kind of been able to do in terms of masking the offensive line. Because before the season, I said, I don't know that this is going to be a very good offensive line, at least right out of the gate. I think they're going to need time to gel. But Arthur Smith's team in general does a really nice job in terms of not putting guys in true pass sets and putting them in advantageous spots out there. And the last thing that I want to touch on before I pass the mic over here, you mentioned Deshaun Elliott. If I had an all-pro vote, he's on my ballot right now with the way that he's looked up to this point. I think he's been the best free agent addition, and he's off to a fantastic start.
Sorry there, Mike just cut out. Horrible timing, but
no, you're good.
So, I agree with all the above. Going back to the quarterback, because I want to touch on this too.
Yeah.
They're 4-2 at the time that, they switched from Fields to Russ. And a few of my friends, they were, a little bit skeptical, unhappy at the time because like they're 4-2, like they have 2 home games coming up. Like, why do you want to, ruffle something that's working? And my big thing was 2 things. One, let me know if you guys agree. I said, one, never at any point in their respective careers would I say that Fields is a better NFL quarterback than Russ. So that was my thing. I'm like, we know sample size is like Russell Wilson is probably better at playing the quarterback position than Justin Fields. So I was a little more open to the idea. And 2, we've seen the pass game struggle a little bit through the first 6 weeks. And I said, well, maybe there's something in practice that maybe Russ just is seeing things that Justin's not. He's able to process quicker, get the ball out of his hands to where that, the depleted offensive line, caving in after 3-4 seconds, which we've been seeing with Justin, maybe it won't happen. So those were the 2 things that, I was a little bit like cautiously optimistic about. And then the first quarter of the Jets game happened and I was like, oh, all right, it doesn't look different at all. Dang it. And then I was at that game, Zach, I don't know if you were, but the fans started chanting. They started chanting for Fields, and I was like, this is exactly what we didn't need. And then Russ turned it on. So, Johnny, we'll go to you. Let me know if you agree or disagree about anything I just said about the quarterback situation.
Well, I disagreed because I just thought that Fields gave us the best opportunity just from an explosive side of things, right? Like the last 2 years in Denver just didn't really look great for us. I know down the stretch he played okay ball, but it looked like he was almost a shell of himself as far as him being able to move around and things like that right there. So for me, it was just I want a modern NFL quarterback. And I thought Justin, was that guy for us for sure. But one of the things about obviously, being a Steeler fan is you have to embrace whatever it is. We're going to embrace it. In the first quarter, I was right with you as far as it didn't look good. But I think one of the things that really stuck out for me was just hearing some of the players in the press conferences and post game talking about Russ and his ability to be able to command the offense and to be able, to identify coverages and pass protections and things like that, which I think was something that he brought to the table that Justin didn't. Justin has always really relied on his athleticism, but I could be, more ecstatic with what it is that we're seeing right now. Obviously opening things up for George Pickens and Calvin Austin has been such a pleasant surprise, man, for sure. And, Van Jefferson, I think, they're doing it with a group of guys, man. And it's awesome to see because it looks like Tomlin has got his fingerprints all over this group and they're all bought in all the way across the board.
I think the switch for me quarterback wise has taken place actually a couple different times. I said I wanted coming into the season Justin to be the starter. The reason being, it wasn't necessarily about thinking about what either one was going to do this year. Just thinking at this point with Russ kind of coming down in his career and Justin at least being right here. Not necessarily that he's continued to progress, but he's at least been the same player, I felt like, through his first 3 years in the NFL. I thought that there was a better chance of Justin, if there was one on the roster, being the long-term solution at quarterback because of age, simply.
Age, yeah, definitely.
So that's kind of where I was at prior to the season. And then we start getting into the season, and I look at, the weapons that we have in the passing game, the status of the offensive line, with all the injuries they have and, feeling like whoever was playing quarterback was going to be running for their life. Who does that benefit more? Or who is going to be more advantageous in that spot? Justin, you would think. So that's kind of where I was at because I was like, okay, even if I think Russ gives them a marginal upgrade in the passing game, do they have the weapons in the offensive line to take advantage of that? I didn't feel like the answer to that was yes until I saw Russ actually play.
Right.
Now, that is when the switch took place for me, thinking, okay, Russ is the guy. And whether it is short term or long term, when you have the roster that you have, when you have aging players like Cam Hayward, TJ Watt's not getting any younger and certainly deserves to have some playoff success in his career. Minkah Fitzpatrick, a team that you feel like you should go all in on. This maybe will be another topic that we bring up other than quarterbacks. Not only do I feel like Russell Wilson should be the quarterback, I also feel like they are showing that they are a team worth buying into at the trade deadline.
Yeah, so that's actually a fantastic segue, Zach, because I did want to talk about
I do this from time to time, pal.
Yeah, I was going to say.
My man.
So, hot button issue, it's all over the media. Steelers needing to potentially add another wide receiver at the trade deadline. So after what we've seen the last 2 weeks, they've had success moving the ball through the air with the current wide receiver room as is. However, a lot of people, including myself, think they probably need to add one more name to feel comfortable. So, Johnny, again, we'll start with you. Agree or disagree, the Steelers should be buyers at the deadline for another receiver, and then maybe give a name or two of somebody you would like to see them try to go for.
Oh, man. Definitely, I think they should be buyers for sure. I know Mike Williams was, a name that was brought up. That's just another name for sure. Another name that did get brought up, I believe, was John Mechie, which I think like that, that's obviously, it just kind of goes to like what it is that like they have going on. He's a guy that, came out of the draft, man, had a high ceiling and just really hasn't had a chance to be on the field due to health and things like that, but he's going to get his opportunity now in Houston. And obviously, like, I know there was, I don't know if it's fake news or what, there was the Cooper Cup stuff, but obviously that's out the window now. That was a pipe dream. I was, pretty hopeful for that. But like, I think they at least have to bring somebody in. I think like right now, like you have like a couple of gadgety wide receivers right now, like in Calvin Austin. He's a big play guy, which like I said, like he's made some plays for us, man. And it can't ignore that. And then Van Jefferson, like, he's made a couple of catches for us and he's been, a viable, target in the red zone. I'm not disappointed with him. I think, it is to be expected what it is. It is what it is with him. But I do believe they should absolutely be looking to bring in another receiver before the trade deadline.
Yeah, I think for me, what has been shown by specifically the play of Calvin Austin, because again, if you just look at the box score, I don't think that you necessarily see it, but going back and watching the tape every week, this guy's been open. I mean, pretty much all year. And I think he could be your slot receiver within this offense. So I'm more so looking for a guy that can play outside opposite George Pickens and maybe take some of that weight off of Van Jefferson, who I think is playing above where he should be in terms of the amount of reps that he's playing. Like, I don't have a problem with this guy being on the roster. He should be the back guy to me on the boundary. So I think, to me, what has changed over the course of these couple weeks isn't them needing to add talent at the receiver position. It's the type of receiver. Like, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Mike Williams, but you could certainly sell me on the fact that, like, hey, body type, what he would do for the team, that's what they should be targeting, because it's a bigger body guy who can block, who, if physically right, is going to be the type of guy to go get those Russ Moon balls opposite of George Pickens. While I think there is some overlap in terms of the type of receiver that they are, I'm not necessarily shying away from that, because those are the type of receivers that Russ has had success with, whether it's DK Metcalf or Cortland Sutton. Those have been the best types of receivers that he's had. So to me, the type of receiver has maybe shifted. I'm with the Mike Williams name again, like predictively, not necessarily what I want, because in an ideal world, the Raiders are selling Jacoby Myers, even though they already traded Devontae Adams, or you're talking the Giants into moving Darius Slayton. Like, that is the two routes that I would preferably go. But predictively, I think they do make a trade, and I think the name is Mike Williams.
Okay, there you have it. Yeah, he's definitely been one of the more popular names floated around out there. I've seen Sutton a little bit. That would be awesome, because I think he basically excels in every area that George Pickens does. And, we saw what Sutton did last year with Russ. He had 10 touchdowns, big physical contested catch guy, just to a lesser flashy degree of Pickens. So I think if you paired them together, you're not missing a beat with either one of them out of the game, because they do rotate their receivers a lot. Arthur Smith has been pretty interesting.
Can I say
with it.
one more thing about this too? Just because I see people talking a lot about, like, even if you feel comfortable about what the state of the receiver room because of the small sample size that we've seen since Russ has taken over, you're really assuming health though there too. I mean, like, what if you have an injury to a George Pickens or a Van Jefferson or Calvin Austin? Then where do you turn to? All of a sudden, you got like Scotty Miller playing meaningful snaps.
Right.
Like, I think that you could really get in a dangerous spot here if they don't add a body at the trade deadline.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point, honestly, that I feel like a lot of people kind of overlook that, because most of the arguments I've seen have not been like, well, what if somebody goes down? Like, then you're signing someone off the practice. You're bringing Andy Isabella up off the practice squad to be your fifth wide receiver and playing 5% of the snaps. But yeah, that's a good point. So Mike Williams, he's been a popular name floated. I think he fits scheme wise. And I think he still does have a little bit of juice left. I know he had the ACL injury last year.
I think what's promising to me is when I've watched the Jets back, like I watched them the game before the Steelers just to have an idea in terms of what we were getting. I feel like physically he's looked better each week. I know that the production necessarily, like, he only had one catch for 15 yards against the Steelers, but he was moving pretty good. And I think that's a sign that he's still on the right path in terms of coming back from that ACL. So I don't think that he's completely cooked. And again, I think the skill set meshes with what they're looking for. The other thing that I want to add to this is I'm typically not like somebody that's like, hey, just make a trade to make a trade, because that's how you typically get burnt. But what I will say is when you watch these other teams at the top of the AFC, the Chiefs getting D-Hop, the Ravens getting Deontay, the Bills getting Amari Cooper, like everybody doing something, I feel like just from the standpoint of making a statement to your team as well, like, again, going back to the, hey, you guys are worth buying into, like, you got to do it.
Good call.
Yeah, it's like keeping up with the Joneses, right? And everyone always says that NFL is a copycat league, right? You're in the AFC, which, a lot of people think is up for grabs this year. Everyone's talking about the NFC, but, the AFC, while the Chiefs are undefeated, Mahomes has not looked, his best this year. The Ravens, they're going to be dynamic. They're going to score a lot of points, but their defense has been struggling. You go to the AFC East, Miami's not what we thought they were. You still got Buffalo there, but they've had their right. So it is definitely up for grabs. So now, if there is a time,
7 of the 16 teams right now in the AFC have 2 wins or less, which means you have 9 teams right now that are theoretically in the mix for 7 spots. Now that could change drastically over the next couple of weeks, but like, it's very much like the Steelers have nearly a 90% chance right now of making the playoffs. Like, very much the picture is becoming more clear for them. I understand what they have on the back half of the schedule, but we had this conversation not that long ago on one of my podcasts. Is like, is that even as daunting as it once looked? When you look at the state of the Cleveland Browns compared to where we thought they were going to be, the Bengals defense stinks. The Ravens defense stinks. Philly looks like maybe they're back on track. Kansas City, like, I kind of wish we would have already gotten them because of what you're saying about Mahomes. Maybe by the time we play them, they figure it out. On the reverse side of that, Washington probably looks better, but like, that's going to happen. These things always find a way to, again, that's why I said about, like, maybe they lost 1 or 2 that they shouldn't have, but will win 1 or 2 that they shouldn't have. These things always even out to me. But yeah, I very much agree that, at least to me right now, they're a top 4 team in the AFC, and they should be buying because of that, because I think it's wide open.
Yeah, and I think getting to 6 wins before the bye is huge for them, because while they do still have 6 divisional games, looking back over the last, we'll just say 5 years or so, while they have lost some games to teams that they shouldn't, I feel like they've been playing their division really well the last 4 or 5 years or so. I know they've won 7 out of 8 against the Ravens. The Browns, they've played well. Cincinnati has gotten them a few times, but they've been able to. So, like, is it possible that they go 4-2 against a division? Yeah. 3-3 even, that puts them at 9. So if they can win one of those other 3 games, they're sitting at 10 and they're getting a playoff spot.
But I think like another element of this too, other than when they started out undefeated a few years ago, like, they typically start to play their best football towards the end of the year is really what happens. Is they've started off slow and they've kind of picked it up, on the back end of things, man. So, like, all that being said, like, you mentioned the Baltimore Ravens piece, right? Like, we got to beef up our run defense for sure, like, to be able to stop Derrick Henry. But, like, they've done a pretty good job against him. Like, traditionally, I know it's a different offense, it's different monster now. And I would dare even say, like, right now, like, I think one of the things, like, you're seeing with Cincinnati is that, yeah, they're struggling defensively, but I think you're also seeing T. Higgins' value to Cincinnati's offense with Jamar Chase, and then obviously like their lack of a run game right now. And like right now, like, you know, Cleveland has always been a tougher team. And like obviously they have a little bit better quarterback play. So I don't think it's far-fetched to think, you know, to your point, that they could go 4-2 inside the division and still put them in a good place, man.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, you know, just taking a quick look around the division there, and I mentioned the Deontay Johnson thing, and I want to get your guys' perspective on this. Not that I want to spend too much time talking about the Ravens, but
Right.
I had an argument with somebody on Twitter yesterday about that move, just because, like, they got him for free. Like, essentially, if the Ravens go on to win the Super Bowl and the Panthers are the worst team in football, which both within the realm of possibility, they moved up one pick by trading Deontay Johnson.
Right.
And I understand, like, okay, is some of what he does or most of what he does kind of parallel to Zay Flowers? Like, do they replicate each other in a way in skill sets? Absolutely. But if you get a player like that for absolutely free, again, maybe one pick, you got to do it. So I don't understand the people that are kind of saying that that's a nothing move and Steelers fans shouldn't be worried. It's not necessarily worried. I wouldn't say worried is the right word, but they certainly got a good player for absolutely nothing, which I feel like is something to talk about. But I had Steelers fans like coming at me for that take on Twitter yesterday, which I thought was weird.
No, I mean, absolutely. For someone of his talent to do that, especially too, I really like what you said earlier about like assuming health. Like, let's say they do lose a Bateman or a Flowers like down the stretch, like you're going to be able to plug in a guy who's going to fill in like a high caliber role, and like that offense isn't going to miss a beat now. I know they were pretty thin at receiver outside of those two, and now they just added, you know,
like, is he better than Nelson Aguilar? Yes,
yeah,
literally,
absolutely.
Yeah, be better at. So why would you not make that move? Cleveland's honestly the one that's been really interesting to me because of how much of a drop off they've taken defensively. Like, that was arguably the best defense in football last year, and not much about it changed. So it's interesting that they've taken such a step in the wrong direction. Like, Baltimore, you could kind of see with all the pieces they lost. Cincinnati lost both their safeties a couple of years ago, and we're kind of going in the wrong direction last year too. But Cleveland's the one to me that I thought I had a good idea of what they were going to be. Like, obviously, I wasn't a believer in Deshaun when he was out there anyway, but I figured, you know, they were going to be able to do enough on offense and have a really good defense to stay at least competitive. And I'm just surprised at where they're at compared to the rest of the division.
For sure.
I hope they don't figure it out by the time the Steelers get them.
It seems like they got a little bit of boost from Jameis, but typically those boosts don't last all that long. It's like a 1 week or 2 week thing when you see that.
But even with that, like to the point, like, you know, we've been talking about, like, the Ravens have struggled against the pass, and then too, like, you know, the Ravens and the Browns matchups, like those matchups, Cleveland has found a way to be pesky with Baltimore in history. So didn't pick it, but like I wasn't like overly shocked that it happened because like of all the dynamics that absolutely changed, like on the offensive side of things. Plus, obviously getting Chubb back, obviously. So I just think it was just perfect storm, man. You know, perfect storm. And and like my take on Deontay is pretty similar. Like, I still think, like, you know, he's a very, very, you know, talented football player for sure. I think maybe some of those Steelers fans maybe are probably looking at it through a fantasy lens perspective as far as like him and like what he would be getting traditionally, like from a volume side of things. Like, I know the offense, you know, had been, you know, kind of short in Pittsburgh, you know, short screens, kind of rhythm stuff or whatever. So that's like the one thing I am a little bit interested to see with him in Baltimore, is just to see like how he adapts to like some of the off schedule stuff with Lamar. But, you know, to your point, man, like you can't turn down getting a player of that caliber, for a bag of potato chips, man, you know?
Right. Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit here. Let's go to the most recent game, Monday night Giants game. Steelers extend their streak to now 22 wins in a row at home on Monday night, which is wildly impressive. But okay, we'll go negative route. We'll do the negative route first, and then we'll go positive. So the bad from the Giants game, we'll switch up the order. Zach, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Johnny, and then I'll finish up. What were some discouraging signs from Monday night? Because I know a few things really stuck out to me.
You know, what I always do, actually, it's funny that you want to start with the negative, because any week I typically lay out on the podcast, the first thing I do when I look at any matchup is, what is the path to a loss? How could this team beat Pittsburgh, and how do we prevent that? For example, against the Jets, Aaron Rodgers likes to have 5 routes run the quick passing game. If we weren't able to get guys, get their paws on the ball at the line of scrimmage, they were able to do that. But if they weren't able to, and you weren't able to get home with 4, then I thought it was going to cause a lot of problems. In the first half, it did. Second half, they adjusted. In this game, obviously, Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, I think, is an underrated receiver.
Yes.
And Tyrone Tracy, I highlighted as well, who's only 2 years into playing running back. But he's a bigger guy, 6 foot, 210. And those types of backs can give you problems, especially when they're that good of an athlete. And I thought the one thing that the Giants did very well, especially in the first half, was getting the Steelers into lighter boxes because of them having to respect Tyrone Tracy's receiving threat. They'd spread him out, bring him back in, and the Steelers were sending Landon Roberts off the field in favor of Peyton Wilson,
right,
and then getting them into advantageous situations to run the football. And I thought the Giants did a really nice job of doing that early. You saw Tyrone Tracy rack up 150 yards total in this game, and I didn't think that it was a very good job of tackling in general, even when they were around him. They'd have 4 or 5 guys on him, and he's still carrying them yards down the field. The other thing what they've done as a whole this year that they've been very good at is keeping a lid on things. I was surprised by the amount of explosives that the Giants were able to get in this one, whether it was Darius Slayton taking things up top over the safeties or whatever it was. Theo Johnson had an explosive late in this game and right before halftime. Malik Neighbors, honestly, I thought he left a couple plays out there. He let Daniel Jones down a couple of times in my mind. Otherwise, who knows how this thing goes. And then the offensive story for me in a negative light, move the ball with ease between the 20s, but then they get into the red zone and it's just themselves shooting themselves in the foot, whether it's the Broderick face mask, George defying physics.
I still don't know how that happened.
Yeah,
or Van not sitting down. If he sits down on that one as opposed to trying to go inside, Russ hits him for a touchdown. So 3 straight drives, leaving points on the board, 2 of them stalling out inside the 5. So I was actually more encouraged by the performance of the offense than I was in the defense in this one, just because I felt like those things are, easier to clean up. And considering the level of competition, I thought any points the Steelers gave up in this one was going to be a discouragement.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you, on a lot of those things. For sure. I wasn't expecting the Giants to put up a lot of points, and definitely the run game again, man, or their inability to be able to stop the run, I should say, in this game was definitely something that was disappointing. And I agree with you 1,000,000%. Neighbors definitely, he definitely left some plays out there, for sure. And then offensively, man, the first half, they were able to run the football anytime they wanted to, and they were able to, to get whatever they wanted. And that was one of the things that I was kind of dumbfounded by. It's hey man, Najee's looking good. He's got some juice. He's got some pop to him. Why are we getting away from the running game, with him? So that was one of the things for me that kind of stood out. And then for whatever reason, it just, we weren't able to get Freiermuth involved. Darnell, he looked pretty good, but those were those were a few of my takes anyway, was that right there, was just our inability to be able to slow down the run game of what we have on defense. And then again, why did we get away from the run game in the magnitude that we did in the first half?
8 yards per carry, by the way, in the first half.
Yeah, he had 10 rushes for 82 yards or something like that. I mean, we haven't seen that high of a yards per carry from him, and probably since he's been here. It's nice to see. Nice to see now that we have good quarterback play, what that opens up for him back there. But just to talk about the defense a little bit before we switch gears to a more positive tune. Zach, I liked what you said about how they were using Tracy's receiving threat to kind of get the Steelers more to their nickel look in terms of their linebackers, taking Landon Roberts off the field, bringing in Peyton Wilson and to pair with Queen. And, what those two dudes do very well is go sideline to sideline. They're both a little bit light for inside backers, but they can fly. So you see them make a lot of plays on the perimeter. But when things are running inside zone, straight at them, that's where you see them struggle a little bit. And, defensive tackles not named Cam Hayward were not really making, plays in the running game, tackles for loss. And, they were getting gashed up the middle. And I hope they can adjust a few things as it gets down the stretch, because the Ravens and the Browns are going to be running the ball a lot. And that's something they're going to have to shore up as they get into these divisional games. And then also, too, just to touch on the offense, I can't remember a first half and where I've watched the Steelers move the ball that easily down the field. But then when they came away with it, and they had 9 points at halftime. It's like how the hell do they have 9 points? They walked down the field on every possession, and then when you look at it, like Pickens is left or whatever, like that's going to happen 1 out of every 100 times that play happens, and then just the killer penalty in the red zone. And Broderick has had a year to forget to this point. It seems like he's just been ripping away big plays every week. So those were the couple things that really stuck out to me.
I want to add to the defensive conversation just because I don't expect this to continue, but also like we talked so highly about Deshaun Elliott for the season. This was easily his worst game though, and the same could be said about Dante Jackson. I mean, Deshaun's run fits were a mess. And I thought Dante had a ton of trouble. Again, like Malik Neighbors left some plays out there, but also the way Slayton was able to get him over top a couple times. But again, I don't necessarily expect those two things to continue. But I think that is why it was where we were still even having a conversation about the way this game was going to go in the fourth quarter.
Right. Yeah. And like, obviously the sky is not falling. They gave up 18 points, which is not a lot. They're averaging giving up, I think, like 14 and a half, which is second in the NFL. So this is a good defense. We're just being nitpicky because we can. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, considering like the level of competition that they were playing in this game.
But I think like all of us like are used to that too. Like it's instance of playing down the competition and then playing up the competition as well. That's been a classic MO of ours as well.
So let's switch gears here. So we'll talk about the good things from the Giants game, and then I want to end with some player takes of players who are exceeding expectations this point in the year, and then some players who are underperforming. We'll finish with that. But some of the good takeaways that you had from the Giants game. Zach, I know you were there too. It's probably an awesome environment. So you go ahead and start, and then we'll jump to Johnny.
All right. Well, positive takeaways. One, the uniform. Big fan of the color rush, and also there's some rumors swirling that was the last time that we're going to see those. So
I saw that on Twitter too, and I like them. So I'll be upset unless they really replace it with a banger.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard, it's going to be a primarily gold jersey.
I dig that.
With some black accent. I see too many of the fan mock-ups to get excited about it until I see it, what the team would actually do, because the fan mock-ups suck. So we'll see what they actually come up with if that's the case. But anyways, the positives in this game to me, like Najee Harris having a third straight game where, the yards over expected, well over, breaking tackles, just looks like there's so much more burst there. And again, I think it goes hand in hand with there being a much more competent passing game to complement that. I think the offensive line from a run blocking perspective, again, especially when you consider what they have at their disposal right now, you're on your third center. Ryan McCollum, who has certainly had some low lights in pass pro, man, he had a tough assignment in Dexter Lawrence on Monday night.
Big sexy.
And
sexy Dexy, baby.
He didn't completely kill them. So I got to give Ryan McCollum some props. Mason McCormick, a fourth-round rookie who I was super high on for 2025, having to step in 2024 and play above expectation to me. I got to give George credit as well, because that's somebody that I've really been on since, again, like with the cycle with him where he just seems disinterested, everything that happened, Cowboys week and stuff like that. But he has seemed engaged right from the get-go. And again, the foot thing, I don't know what you really do about that. But I'm not going to hold that one against him. And then defensively, the adjustments, because for a long time, I feel like we've talked about them not being able to make in-game adjustments. Well, they still haven't given up a single point this year in the third quarter. So to me, that tells me they're doing something right at halftime. And also, just their ability on the edges to take over games, whether it's Alex Highsmith or TJ Watt. In this case, both of them, once they do have a lead and know that the other team is in obvious passing situations, just being able to pin their ears back and make that type of play TJ did to seal it. Those are the types of plays that you're paying him for. And it's just great to see. So I think that is kind of what I walked away feeling like.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff, man. And like I echo a lot of the same things. So like I'll kind of take a different approach, man. For me, it was more I'm thinking more about like some secondary things, not literally in the secondary, but like Jalen Warren coming back, looking like, looking a little bit better, man, looking like he's got a little bit more boost, man, which I think is obviously going to be big for Najee. It's going to be big for the team coming down the stretch for sure. Russ being able to make some plays like, off schedule, man, him being able to be out of the pocket and moving, I think was definitely like something that was nice for me to see for sure, just to see him kind of have a little bit of juice as well. And then the other thing, man, is like special teams. Special teams has been showing up, man, every week for this group, man, one way or another, man. Calvin Austin this week, the week before that, it was the block punts, man. Boswell is still obviously being one of the best kickers, if not the best kicker in the NFL, man. So for me, I just think like it definitely makes me feel good to be able to see like that element of our game. Like, all right, like we don't have to worry about, matter of fact, like this is an element of our game that like we actually are better than most teams at. So for me, like that was definitely one of the bigger pieces, man, for me to take away. And like I said, man, like the offensive line play, I'm right there with you as far as like we're ahead of schedule with those guys. And George Pickens, man, I'll say this, like I've been a George Pickens fan, from the jump, man. And like I haven't quit on him. And it's really just good to see over the last 2 weeks, man, him being able to make plays and seeing him actually like smiling and having fun and doing things, man, versus like the sulking pieces that we've seen in the previous weeks, man. So.
Yeah. So you guys hit the nail on the head. To avoid redundancy, I won't say that. I agree with a lot of what you guys stated, but one more thing to add. We touched on it a little bit earlier, though we all feel they still do need to add another wide receiver to the room. It was nice to see that the Calvin Austins and Van Jeffersons of the world can make big plays in the passing game. Now, whether that's sustainable for the rest of the, nine games in the season, I'm not sure, but we know that it's there. We've seen it. And, that was definitely encouraging to see when you compare that with, George Pickens, the running game, and then the defense being opportunistic. So
also, I want to add just in general, the special teams this year. I mean, I think they have an argument to be the best unit in football, like offense, defense, or special teams. The Steelers special teams, they're making a game-changing play, literally every single
week.
Yeah.
There's I wish I was more into it. I'm not a huge analytical guy, but there's got to be some percentage of like if you block a kick in a game or if you have a special teams touchdown, I wonder what the winning percentage is of the team. Because
I thought you were going to say like a special teams value number, because somebody actually put some data together and like far and away the Steelers have the most valuable special teams unit so far.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's not surprising just with the block kicks and the touchdown. It's been nice to see. And, it sounds like a cliche that, special teams is a third of the game. Anyone who's played football, you've had some coach tell you that throughout the years. But
special players, special teams,
yeah, but it's true. Like you see, it's won a couple games for them. Like it's phenomenal what they've been able to do.
I was on the field Monday night after the game. And Rodney Williams had this really nice, I don't know if enough people appreciated it, but on the punt return touchdown, Rodney Williams had this nice box out block where he like just threw his hands up, like let him know that he wasn't doing anything. And I went up to him and I was like, bro, way to not take a penalty on that. And he's like, dude, thank you so much for saying that. No one ever talks about
it. Love it.
No, they said it on the broad, like when they showed the replay, I was like, that was a great job of not like either blindsiding or hitting him in the back. Because how many times do you see on any return there's laundry on the field? It's like every other special teams return there's a flag. So that was
he's like, normally I have to wait until we get into the meetings for Danny to pull it up on film for anybody to even notice that it happened.
Right. You probably made his night. That's great.
Yeah, he was smiling. Yeah, he's smiling ear to ear.
Okay, let's wrap up here. So players who have been exceeding expectations to this point in the season, players who've been underperforming. We'll do one on either side of the ball for each. So let's start on the offensive side of the ball. Zach, we'll go to you first. So someone who's exceeding your expectations of coming into the season, and then someone who might be underperforming a little bit on offense.
Okay, there's actually probably a couple that I could go with, but I honestly want to show the trenches some love. So I'm going to say overperforming Mason McCormick from the standpoint of, again, being a 4th round rookie and somebody that if you watched his tape at South Dakota State, looked like he had a far way to go in terms of his pass pro. I felt pretty good about where he was already as a run blocker and certainly has the right temperament to do it.
Oh, yeah.
He's just the type of dude that you want on your offensive line. But I'll tell you what, like, he's been very good. Certainly has exceeded expectations in terms of what I thought he was going to be out the gate in terms of his pass pro. And again, you know, maybe there's something there where Pat Myers struggles more with developing tackles than he does interior guys. Because I think in terms of the interior, they've done a lot better job. Because if not for injury, I might throw Zach Frazier as my guy, but I'll stick with Mason McCormick from a positive perspective. And from a negative perspective, we're going right to his right. I think Broderick Jones has killed way too many drives this year. And to be honest, when we drafted him, he was so raw, like similarly to what Mason McCormick was in pass pro. I thought that's kind of what you were getting in terms of Broderick. The thing is, he actually has then carried that over, unlike Mason McCormick. And I don't think that you've seen enough progression. I was somebody that said, I felt like, okay, like when you take a tackle in the 1st round, especially that high, you're hoping he's like a 10-year plus starter.
Yeah.
But with Broderick, I was like, okay, maybe you don't really see him come into his own until like year 3. And I know that we're not there yet, but I also don't feel like you've seen enough progression to feel super comfortable about saying that he's still on the right path. So I think he's had way too many drive killing penalties that are like single-handedly, you can just circle him and say, this is why they, 4 points came off the board and they had to settle for 3 instead of 7.
Yeah, definitely feel that way about Broderick for sure. I think that's kind of like, I think that's the sentiment from like, from a lot of Steeler Nation for sure. So like, I won't like go, don't have anything to add to that. But I think like one of the guys, man, like I've been pleasantly surprised with, man, just like in the moments that he's been able to be on the field is Mount Washington. It's like he's looked really good, man. And I think like when we actually did draft him, like I'm a big SEC guy, I'm a big UT fan, so obviously like I pay attention to all the SEC players. Was super excited to get him, and like you're seeing him obviously in this offense with Arthur Smith, like they're able to utilize him like in points here and there and whatnot. But just to be able to see him get out in space, which is what like I've been wanting to see, and I think a lot of us have been wanting to see, is him out in space. He's been a pleasant surprise, for me this year. Like I said, Broderick Jones. And then, man, like past that, like I don't really have, a lot of complaints, man. You know what I mean? Like as far as like any other players, man, I think everybody has looked, relatively good. I would say maybe if I had one complaint, maybe I would say Patrick Queen, like maybe not, being what he was as a Raven and all that. Like he's been all right, man. But I think for like me, I was expecting a little bit more. So I think there's still some more meat on the bone for him, and hopefully he can come through and make some plays for us coming down the stretch.
Yeah, I agree with you on Queen. I'll get to that in a second too. But for offense, I'm actually going to go with Russ for overachieving. While I did, I guess I was a little more positive when they signed him than a lot of the rest of the fan base was, but I was not expecting them to just start walking down the field with him there.
Yeah.
That the throw he made to Pickens, that 50-yard throw on the sideline, was one of the best throws I've seen in probably 3 or 4 years. I truly sat back and I was like, I have not seen a Steelers quarterback make a throw like this probably since like the Big Ben, the team that they lost to Jacksonville in like 17, like since then. So he's been awesome. I'm glad it worked out because there's a lot of questions about it, especially with having a very competent backup in Justin Fields as well. So I would say I was not expecting them to be humming on this level when he came in. So he gets the award there. And then again, just to echo a little bit what Zach said, Broderick, it just has not worked out this year. I will say I still do think it's weird that they traded up to draft a left tackle and they're playing him at right. While it's the same position, it is a little bit awkward that all of your footwork is backwards. That does actually make a difference because you see it too with TJ and Highsmith. They're not super comfortable switching sides. They'll even tell you that because while they're still rushing the passer, everything is backwards and it takes a while to get adjusted. So I'm not sure that he's super comfortable playing right. He might say he is, but he just gets caught like reaching and his footwork's bad. It hasn't looked great. So yeah, I would say he's probably underperforming the most in my eyes. Let's go to defense. Zach, we'll go to you first. Same thing. Someone who's exceeding your expectations. So I think I know who you might pick. And and then someone who's been underperforming a little bit.
Yeah, how could I say that I have Deshaun Elliott as an all-pro but not pick Deshaun
Yeah.
Elliott? Because a lot of people were actually like, I think he's a name that people know, but when we signed him in a free agent class that also had the likes of Justin Simmons and some other safeties, people were really like, "Oh, is this a safety we're bringing in?" But Deshaun Elliott has been everything that they needed him to be, like everything that he does for them, whether it's playing around the line of scrimmage and making plays there. He could play too high. They could ask him to play single high if they want Minka to go into the slot or play robber. He can play in the slot himself. Like, he's done pretty much everything that they've asked him to do and played it at a high level. So I think he's been, as good as it gets. I know the name Patrick Queen already got brought up, but to be honest, it's not even like necessarily bad. It's just more so like the splash plays haven't been there that we kind of expected, whether it's, he's had like 2 pass deflections that he could have easily intercepted. There was one against Denver where he probably just didn't see the ball. It got on him too fast, but Bo Nix literally just fired it right at his face mask. So he could have had one there, and he started to make some plays more around the line of scrimmage and getting a couple tackles for loss. But I think the splash hasn't necessarily been there. But man, like, other than him, it's kind of hard to look around this defense right now and say that there's anybody that's necessarily underperformed. I'll say I'm surprised that we haven't seen more production or more snaps from Keanu Benton, but I don't necessarily think he's been bad. I just think Cam Hayward and a healthy Larry Ogunjobi are playing ahead of him right now. But Keanu Benton, who I feel like is, a very good player, and I expect him to hit a second-year leap this year, I thought maybe we would see more plays from last year turn into sacks this year, which we really haven't seen.
Yeah.
Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's definitely it's PQ for me, like I already mentioned, but like I think, like, for me, man, like the thing that like I love the most, and I've kept saying it, man. I'll say 2 things, man. I hope fans aren't like being disappointed with like the lack of production for Minka, because it's just nice to be able to see him roam and be able to make plays and him not be up towards the line of scrimmage. But like for me, man, it's Joey Porter Jr., man. Like, just the fact that like we've got one of the top 5 corners in the NFL. And, that Chase Claypool trade ended up being what it ended up being for us, man, and to have this guy. And to say that, like, hey, every single week, man, like, we can walk that guy out there and we know that he's going to be able to, lock down, the opposing team's number 1 wide receiver, man. It's been a long time since we had something like that, man. So I'm not saying he's exceeding my expectations, but I think, like, for him to be a top 5 corner in year 2, he's moving pretty quick, man. So it's just dope to see, man.
Yeah. So I'm going to stick in the secondary with you guys, but I'm going to pick a little different player here for exceeding my expectations. And that's going to be Beanie Bishop. And let me tell you why. So undrafted out of West Virginia, he comes here, competes for the nickel spot, which in the Steelers defense is super important in terms of what it is in the blitz game, in the quick tackle screen game, and also in coverage. And I think we saw Mike Hilton set a really high standard for that position when he was here. And since he's been gone in Cincinnati, they've been struggling to find someone who, played it as impactful as he did. And, Beanie, I thought he started a little slow. I do think in the Dallas game, he got picked on a little bit. I thought that was kind of his baptism by fire. And I was like, oh, Jesus, like they're targeting him on plays now. And we made Jalen Tolbert look like Michael Irvin. That game still pisses me off. But anyways, so seeing how he responded, though, after that game and how he played against the Jets, the 2 interceptions, has another interception Monday night. That's a huge bounce back from a rookie after he had undoubtedly his worst game of the season. And, to see him making 3 big splash plays here in prime time, nonetheless, for someone who's undrafted, I'm going to give it to him. I do think Deshaun Elliott is obviously worth a mention. He's been incredible. He makes a play in the run game every game. It was against the Jets, actually. He timed a blitz perfectly and got a TFL. And I saw it from the 500 levels. I was like, holy shit, that's a crazy play from Elliott there. He's been awesome. And then just a little bit disappointed in Patrick Queen. Not that it's been terrible, but again, what you said, Zach, just not as much splash as I think we were hoping for the contract they signed him to.
Right. I think the pass coverage stuff for the most part has been good. I think his run fills have left something to be desired. And I think just the reaction time hasn't always been there. And again, some of that's going to just have to be things that he learns within this defense. I think maybe he just doesn't. We're talking about relatively early still in his Steelers career, so I fully expect that the second half of the season looks better than the first half. But as we sit here, it's like it's good that we are even like nitpicking and picking him out of this group, because there's not much to complain about the defensive side of the ball. When you said you were staying with the secondary, I actually thought you were going to go with Dante Jackson, who was
he's
been a dog too, man. He's been
about to be cut by Carolina, and he's come in here and played as well as he has.
Yeah. All right. So that was some great discussion. We're going to wrap it up there with that. Johnny, we'll go to you. Tell the listeners where they can find you, what kind of stuff you're putting out, and then we'll jump to Zach here.
Oh, yeah, man. Y'all can find me on Twitter, man, at Johnny Main, Jony Main 37185. I'm co-host the Fantasy Football Show with my man Nick Wilcox. You can catch us every Tuesday at 8 p.m. We do the waiver wire, start sit, take your trade questions and whatnot. And then on Sunday we also have a Sunday show at 10:30 where we go over DFS, we go over picks, props. Tune in, man. Give us a listen, man. That's where y'all can find me at.
Zach.
Gotcha. Good stuff. And you can find me at Zachary Smith PGH on all social platforms. You can also find me every weekday, Steelers Afternoon Drive, part of Pittsburgh Steelers Now. And then you can find me at Around the 412 on all social media platforms, also all listening platforms, and right here on YouTube.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming on. Steelers are 6-2 heading into the bye, and we'll see what happens on the 10th in the nation's capital. So we'll hit the outro, and then we'll be out of here. See you, boys.
Later.